Bernard. I'm the founder of Women in Block and also Tapo Blockchain. The purpose of this organization, Women in Block, is to encourage women leadership in executive roles in the blockchain industry, which is an emerging industry by nature. And as every emerging industry, it gives opportunities for growth that are very abundant and quick as well. So if we can now generate a participation of women in this industry, I believe that within a few years we're going to lead. So that's the purpose of this organization, to share knowledge, to share opportunities with each other, to become experts as much as we can, and to lead the blockchain and crypto industry in the future. So I'd love for you to just a little bit explain the token economics behind Poland.
So it was great to see Adi does this, because, you know, I always talk and I do this thing, so Adi, thank you, now I'm not alone. I'll just add some color to this. So the token economics, the example I always give is, we all sit in the pool, you know, the kiddie pool on the roof, and there's things that are bringing, you know, water pours in, and there's water coming out, and the more we can create the, you know, the circulation, and if we can make the water coming in, you know, faster than the water coming out, then the rise, you know, the level of the water rises and more will join the pool. So, you know, that's the illustration for token economics, and I'll make it, you know, more economics in a minute. But I think Adi said a lot of these things. The idea is, what does a token economics is built on? Really, it's very simple. You want to give incentives for adoption, incentives for behavior that creates real value. So it can be economic or social behavior that creates value to the participants. So you want incentives, you want to create that prosperity or to create that value, and the token is the mechanism that allows you to allocate that value created to the participants. And I think, you know, these are the three principles, and many people talked about it, and each one is a challenge by itself.
So the water example is very interesting. However, in the financial world, even in the traditional financial world, when a bank is giving you a loan, there is no real money that's being added somewhere to offset. There's just numbers added in the end, right? So in this example of water, is it really water? Like, you're adding kind of value that doesn't exist, the future projected to.
So I think even in credit, even in traditional financial markets, the idea with credit is you're extending credit because now it can finance economic activity that can create value. So you're extending credit to businesses because they want them to invest and develop. So I think that's not where it's different from traditional idea that, you know, if you can create that value, you can share. And I think many people said earlier on, it's more the concept that blockchain is trying to do is to say, once that value is being created, especially if we have a network effect, if we have two-sided markets, we need buyers, we need sellers, and definitely if we go into ecosystems and think of partners, and we talk about city partners, then once that value being created, it's if it's a centralized platform, it enjoys that value and extracts rents. So being a competition economist in my training, that's what it does. When you think of where would a value be created in a token economy, either you created a new activity that created value by itself, or you really put in competition where it wasn't, and instead of, you know, those centralized entities extracting the rents, you're trying to allocate it among people, or really you're facilitating synergies in an ecosystem that haven't existed. It's a little bit like the first bit that Dee talked about, you know, the B2B and other interactions that wouldn't otherwise be as efficient. So I think these are three different sources of value. When you're talking about different use cases in blockchain, they each kind of tackle, you know, potentially a different dimension as to where that value would come from.
Okay, that's really interesting. So we're talking about value creation again, but more from a standpoint of distributing, not only creating, but distributing value, right?
I think that's the two sides. It's the creating and it's the distributing thing.
All right. So why do communities need a coin?
So I think that
Their own
coin. So I think a little bit someone talked about when do you not need it. So, you know, we talked about you don't need it if you can replace it with dollar. You don't need it if you can, you know, replace it with the word database. But the idea is, if we talked about, if you want not only to create the incentive and not only to create the value, but what you really want to do is connect the change or connect the incentive to change behavior with the value of the token. And what what do I mean? If you're looking at a city as an ecosystem, and what you want to do is you want to create that shared incentive that people will understand that actions that they're taking, economic actions such as where do they go and buy their coffee, and whether they carpool into the city instead of using their own car, and all their city activities, to the extent that you want to create that identity, meaning that the economic prosperity being created is manifesting itself in the value of the token and what they see, that's where you want to create a token that is different from fiat. Because it's very, very important to acknowledge the challenge. If you can do it with dollar, it's more efficient, okay? You don't need to, as I think Ati talked about, Sana, you don't need to bring it into the system in order to move it, in order to take it out. That's not where you create efficiencies. So really, I think the only reason to do it is if you really want to create that connection between the activity that people are taking and the value that they're seeing in the token, which then has to be separate from the value of the fiat, for good and bad, because at the end, we're also living in a world which is outside any local community. So that's why the analogy of the pool. There are always going to be money flowing out. Businesses are going to take a local currency and they're going to pay rent, and they're likely, not in the near future, going to pay with the local currency. But if you can think of the ecosystem being a little bit richer, if you can think of a municipality in that ecosystem, so maybe you can't pay rent in your local currency, but you can pay your waste fees to the municipality in the local currency. So now,
so how does this local token economy intersect with the municipal economy?
So, again, there was a question from the audience before, what can tokens be like? And Kolu chose to focus on the use case of geography, meaning a local currency, and in particular, we focus on cities. It's nothing in the technology that focuses on city. It's more of the economic model that you're trying to build. So we believe that cities, the numbers, by 2025, 70% of the world population is going to live in cities. And we see this trend called, smart cities, where even if you're not a smart city, you want to think of the city as an economic, social entity in and by itself. And when we looked at the agenda of smart cities, we understood that, they're all about, okay, we have a lot of data. Let's just collect data and understand what we can do with the data. And the second piece was, but it's about people. We want to listen to the people. And then the evolution was, okay, now we have data, we know what people want, let's offer solutions, great solutions, technological solutions that will improve everyone's life. And then, I sit and I say, but at the end of these very fancy solutions, recycling, energy consumption, all of that, there's a little person that needs to make a little decision. Do I throw, my Coke bin, into the trash or the recycling? Do I take someone else in my car today in order to have two instead of one in my car? So the incentives we feel are missing from this agenda of smart cities, and that's what we're trying to do, to prove that the use case of using a local currency with all of what we talked about, a true token economy, can actually incentivize and make these changes in an ecosystem, in a city ecosystem, that will create prosperity, will actually serve the agenda, and will be shared by residents.
That's a grand vision. However, you mentioned
it's a long way.
It's a long way.
You have to look up to
you
the
keep
sky
saying,
and then think about baby steps.
You keep saying, it's a long way away, not in the near future. I have a feeling that may have to do with regulation. So I'm wondering if you can shed a light of some regulations that may be slowing down the adoption of crypto, and some things like jurisdictional shopping. Also in the light of the whole trend of cities, right? Moving to cities. In China, for example, they're now building 17 huge cities and moving everything up from village to cities, building these huge infrastructures, which is obviously the country is hostile to crypto, but I'm wondering if eventually it's going to turn around and we'll see this huge crypto trend coming out of the Chinese cities. But I'd love to hear more about the regulation and jurisdiction.
So just one word before the regulation, so that it doesn't sound like it's all the trade. Kolu has 4 operating communities with, close to 200,000 users and, thousands of merchants. So the vision is to see ecosystems which include municipalities, include anchor institutions, institutions, whether it's hospitals, big employers, as part of that ecosystem where everyone is incentivizing, uses the city currency. So, there are steps towards it, but obviously, there's a long way to go. Regulation is certainly, being an ex-regulator, so I have to admit, it's a stick and a carrot, and you have to make sure that the carrot is there, okay? So the stick is, it's very hard to be regulated, you have to do AML, you have to do a lot of, you have to have your audited financials, and it's a financial institution, you keep other people's money, and it's very, very hard, it's truly hard to be a regulated entity. However, the carrot is that, and I think Gan talked about it earlier, it's not, unless you're really living on chain, you're interacting with these intermediaries who are the gatekeepers to, from the traditional financial world. And in order to have these necessary interactions with the banking system, with all of the financial systems, there has to be regulation. And there's going to be regulation that's going to care about, anti-money laundering. There's going to be regulation about taxes. There's going to be regulation about, whether it's a consumer protection. And I think that it needs to always focus on what carrot do I give, because that's the true incentive. It's an incentive that's going to come from the business need to do that in order to have the right powerful partners to actually, to actually grow.
And as the last question, I'd like to understand the slogan of Kodo, which is turning coffee into crypto. Do you care to explain?
Yeah. It's one of my favorite t-shirts. There was a long evolution of t-shirts, and my favorite one is turning coffee into crypto. And the point was that what we focus in this local model, the city currency, the idea is to actually, it be part of the daily interactions that people do. So if you want to make people take big steps and make changes, you better first understand how you penetrate into their daily habits. Because if I get my coffee, if I get my coffee and it turns into my city currency, and then I can use my city currency for something else, then you actually talk about adoption. And adoption not by, crypto traders or people who chose to be in the crypto space because that's what they want, and they're actually excited about the animal, spirit in it. No, you actually want to get adoption by those who are just, going to buy their coffee and making the decisions. It's the adoption by, everyone, every person, residents, businesses, I think is the big challenge. And it's the big challenge in any way, but in any possible way you can think of. And I think that's what makes it exciting, because as an ex-regulator, that's what regulators fear the most, and rightly so. If you're going to deal with a person who actually wanted to go and get coffee, and they didn't intend to get crypto, you better worry about consumer protection. So I think that it's the big gains, but the big challenge is how do you get that mass adoption so that it can be a true, relevant incentive for those token economies that different people want to create for different reasons.
Thank you so much. Thank you.